How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about Vampire's Kiss from 1989. Well, to be fair, I think a few places list this as 1988. I'm not sure why there's a discrepancy. The back of my DVD case here, back of the box, says 1989, so that's the year I'm going to go with. Anyway, this is directed by Robert Bierman, and of course stars Nicolas Cage in one of his most iconic roles. This movie is often described as the most Nicolas Cagey Nicolas Cage movie, and we'll get into that in the review. But anyway, I'm a big fan of Nicolas Cage. I have actually about half of his movies, which is really saying something considering how many movies he's been in. But I wanted to cover a few of his movies. And I was like, okay, Valentine's Day is coming up, and I know this isn't really a Valentine's Day movie, it isn't really a romantic movie, but Vampire's Kiss, it has a kiss in the title. I know I'm stretching things, but I wanted to do it, so let's cover this movie. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and talk a bit about the plot. No major spoilers, but I do want to cover certain plot points and what I think about them, as well as make sure you guys have a certain understanding of, a basic understanding as to what this movie is about, but again, no major spoilers. This movie stars Nicolas Cage as this businessman, Lo, and it begins with him, he's on a date with this beautiful woman, brings her home, and while they're going about their business, Bat swoops into the apartment, and the two are chased out. They leave and go find a hotel room for that night. But Nicolas Cage can't get the idea of this bat out of his head. He kind of starts to become fixated on the bat. Now, later, a different night, a mysterious woman shows up and seduces Cage. He is quite suddenly taken by her, and we find out why. This woman is actually a vampire, probably the bat that flew in earlier. She begins to feed on Nicolas Cage, and this starts to affect his life, and over the course of the movie, he starts to realize that he might be becoming a vampire, and it's this businessman that already has a lot going in his head. He's not a perfect guy before by any means. Suddenly coming to this realization that he might be a vampire. In addition to that, what most of this movie's about actually, he works at this publishing house, and one of their writers is requesting a copy of his contract for his first story. It seems like it's really more of a nostalgia thing. You know, he's a big successful writer now. He wants a copy of his first contract for nostalgia's sake, but he can't find it. It's not where it's supposed to be. So he takes his secretary, Alva, and assigns her to look for this file, but it cannot be found, and they're looking everywhere through all these papers, and it's taking days and days, and Nicolas Cage starts to get very frustrated with her. And to be fair, this is a movie about vampires, yet at least 60%, 66% of this movie is about Nicolas Cage getting mad at Alva for not finding this contract. And that's a weird thing to say, is that this is a vampire movie that's mostly about this lady looking for a paper and getting harassed by Nicolas Cage. Now, you may think that's not enough plot to fill that much runtime, that surely, you know, there's more to it, but no, that's what most of this movie is about, and because it's Nicolas Cage giving his most over-the-top performance, it somehow doesn't get boring. It really stays, you know, wacky and crazy, and you get to see just the plot of how far looking for this paper can go and how upset Nicolas Cage gets over it. you get to see that there's an increasing level of tension just for something so trivial. And the thing is, it really is trivial. He calls the guy on the phone to talk to him about it, and the guy on the phone's like, "Oh yeah, I don't really care. Just get that to me whenever you find it. It's not important. It's, whatever." He doesn't care, but now Alva's in the room when they have that conversation. He's just sitting there listening to it, and he tells Alva, "Oh yeah, he was chewing me out. He was furious. He said he'd leave the company if he doesn't get this paper." Totally just lies to her and says, "This is super important. Why are we not getting this paper?" And you begin to wonder, why is he, so obsessed with her and putting her life through the ringer for this? And if you look at his character, you begin to see that he is all about having power, and he wants to be in charge. He wants to be the big boss. And this is simply the lady he can push around, and because he can, because it gives him a feeling of power, he is going to push her around. And sadly, this is something you do see quite often in real life, obviously not taken to hilarious extremes, but I understand that. There's a third plot element in this movie where he's going to a psychiatrist and he's explaining what he thinks of everything, and you do get a bigger insight into his character during the psychology scenes. Now, this is where you get the alphabet scene, but we'll get to that in a minute. But this really does need to enforce something, that this movie really is a character study. We're supposed to be analyzing why Nicolas Cage is what he is, and let's go ahead and get into this. This is Cage's most over-the-top and crazy performance for someone who had a whole career of over-the-top, crazy performances, characters with lots of passion and fun, cool, memorable moments. And in this movie, he is on the whole time. You get some movies, like I just watched Matchstick Men, where he's a little bit of a weird character for most of the movie, and then he has the one scene in the pharmacy where he just freaks out and goes full Nicolas Cage. In this movie, he's on that level the whole time, so it is really, really cool. And there's several things with his performance. He does this weird voice. I don't know how to describe it. I don't think I can do a good enough impersonation. It almost sounds like a bad... imagine if, you were doing an impersonation of young Keanu Reeves trying to be a rich man. It's a weird way to describe it. Just look up a clip. But he has this weird accent the whole time. But I looked up, he was explaining why he did that, and they said this isn't the way this character naturally talks. This is the character doing an accent because that he thinks he'll have more status if he talks like this, and that will give him more power, and that's what he really wants. And in turn, sometimes the accent comes and goes intentionally by if he's talking to someone he's trying to impress, or if he's being more casual, like say with his therapist, it might start to disappear there. And that really is an interesting note. This character is pushed to some crazy moments. Like I said, when he's talking with his psychiatrist, he's like, who could misfile something? Why would something get misfiled? You take the first letter and you order it in alphabetical order, which prompts him to say his whole ABCs in the line. I never misfiled anything in my life. Not once. Not one time. And crazy moments. You get one scene where he's calling for Alva, and Alva's like, no, I'm not doing this. I don't want to come because you're going crazy. So he walks out into where his secretary's desk is. He sees her, jumps on top of another desk, and points, there you are! And it's just this crazy scene. He even goes to the point where a couple times in this movie, he literally has to chase her down, and she's literally running to get away from this guy. And you're wondering, why is this guy so insane why is he going to this limits? And you really do see that he is someone who is wanting to be big, wanting to be in charge, and he's flexing his muscles any chance he gets and going nuts trying to be the biggest there is in the room, you know, and there really is something to it. Another big element with his character is you begin to wonder if this is all real. He gets bitten by a vampire, you see this, and you have no reason to question it, because, you know, it's a movie, anything can happen, and if the movie says he gets bit by a vampire, then he gets bit by a vampire. That's what happened in the movie. But you get a scene pretty early on. Nicolas Cage is in the bathroom, he's washing his hands, and he looks up, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm not there," and he touches the mirror because he can't see himself. But we as an audience quite clearly see his reflection in multiple mirrors. You even get some guy in the stall going, "Yeah, you're still there, quit bugging me." And you begin to question as you look about it, and there's several other scenes that point to this too. Did he really get bit by a vampire, or did he just imagine the whole thing? And having him where he's a guy who thinks he's getting bit by a vampire, thinks he's turning into a vampire, you get him doing lots of things that he thinks a vampire would do. He doesn't have a coffin because he didn't die. He takes his couch and flips it over and hides under his flipped over couch, making that into his vampire coffin. He eats a roach, a lot like Renfield quite does in most of the movies. And in real life, for the take, Nicolas Cage actually did eat the roach, so major props for doing that. It's pretty nasty. So he eats a roach, later he's convinced he needs blood, and you get this crazy scene where Nicolas Cage is in a park, he's walking, and then he starts chasing a pigeon. And it's just this weird visual of Nicolas Cage chasing pigeons in the park. It is crazy. And then, like, he doesn't have vampire teeth, so he goes to a store and he buys vampire teeth, and they're like those plastic vampire teeth you used to get when you were kids, and he puts them in his mouth and he's like, "Am I a vampire now?" And it's really crazy stuff, and sometimes he'll do crazy over-the-top moments, over-the-top movements. But when you look at him, you realize he's actually mimicking the movements from Nosferatu, and you get to see the character in the movie, actually in a previous scene, had watched Nosferatu. So you get to see where this information is coming into his head from, and then him spitting that out and mimicking it. He saw this movie on TV, now he's mimicking the movements in real life because he thinks he's a vampire. There's a lot to it, and it's really interesting. And there's really, with this movie, a lot of little details and a lot of things that make more sense than you can see. There's a ton of effort put into this movie, and even though a lot of people just, look at Cage's performance and laugh, and on the front it even goes, a dark comedy, a sleek, outrageous dark comedy from the Los Angeles Times. And this is one of those movies that you think this probably wasn't meant to be a comedy, but they later reassigned it that because that's more marketable. But there is something there, something beneath it all. This is a character study. This is a businessman wanting wealth and power, going to the extremes to get it, and then getting fixated on this bat that flew into his room, and because he's pushed so far to the edge trying to get what he wants, that really causes him to slip, and he was never really sane or good to begin with, but he's pushed off this path, and you get to see someone mimicking what he thinks he's supposed to do in this crazy situation. It really is an interesting character study, and there is a lot to it, and I know a lot of you are thinking, okay, this is just a fun, silly Nicolas Cage movie. There's nothing serious or deep here. This isn't a big, serious, good movie. But the thing that I really should mention is that there is more to it, and something that should really be mentioned is this movie was done, another version kind of, in a serious situation that a lot of people really like. I'm talking about American Psycho. American Psycho came out years and years later and replaced Nicolas Cage with Kristen Bale and replaced vampire with serial killer. These movies are very strangely similar. One might say American Psycho is a spiritual successor to this movie. Businessman becoming a thing from a horror movie, criticizing businessman culture, criticizing how far people will go to the top. And it's really weird that, American Psycho does this, and yeah, there's lots of comedy in American Psycho, but that's looked at as a serious art film. And Nicolas Cage and Vampire's Kiss, everyone just says is funny. There's more to this, and yes, I know it is funny, it is wacky, it is over the top. I'm not saying it's not a silly movie, but I'm just saying, give it a chance to analyze it for a little more. I know it still is silly, but there is a method to this movie's madness, and I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. There is a method to the madness. I'm not saying there's not madness. But anyway, if you're fans of Nicolas Cage, this is one you have to watch. I'd easily put this in the top 10 Nicolas Cage movies. A great, memorable performance, lots of freak-outs and craziness, and some great moments. A lot of you have probably watched the clips online, but the whole movie, it's not just a few scenes that are funny, even though you keep seeing the alphabet scene and the scene where he's staring at her with those crazy eyes. The whole movie is entertaining, and I definitely say go and watch the whole thing. At the moment, I think it's streaming on Amazon Prime. Now, that's just at the time of recording. Things come and go. But if it's still there, or if you see it anywhere, just pick it up and watch it. I really do recommend it, both as a comedy, but also as a character study. It's really fun. But anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You're really helping the channel out. I do primarily horror movies on here, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, I'd recommend sticking around, and you'll probably find some stuff that you've seen before. Anyway, I'll put a relevant playlist on the bottom. Should be something cool. I'm not sure what I'm going to put there yet. But anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day.